In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this exact animation. I know this is specific, but it has some cool techniques and it's very flexible. If you want to do something similar, but not exactly this, could be helpful. This is inspired by something in the end credits of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but I inevitably put my own spin on it a little bit, and it's just an abstract thing. So let's get going. The very first thing I want to do is hide the default cube. I'm actually going to need a cube later, so you can delete it if you want. You'll have to bring it back. I'll start with Shift A and make a UV sphere, and this is going to be the main blob of the thing. And if we tab into edit mode and rotate on Y by 90 degrees, this will set it up in a way that's a little easier to get a good blobby shape. So I'll select one point at the back of it. This is going to be the back, and turn on proportional editing using the O key or this button up here, and then grab along X and pull it out until it's kind of like an airplane turbine shape. And if you want, you can select another ring and scale that down to get even more. I'm not actually liking that right now. Maybe this ring. Scale it down. Yeah, to get a little more of a teardrop, maybe. Whatever you want to do. And I think I'll make it a little thinner overall if I scale on everything but X. Just get it a little more streamlined so it looks like it's going fast through space or whatever. This is just the starting point. We're going to add a lot of modifiers to change the shape of it. So the next thing I want to do is set up the camera for how it's going to be, because that'll affect how we're going to lay out the curve. I'm not going to use this light at all, so I'll delete that. Select the camera and Alt-R, Alt-G to clear the rotation and translation. Then rotate by 90 degrees on the X-axis just to line it up straight, and then grab it along the Y-axis fairly far back, maybe minus 16, 17, something like that. Looks all right to me. Maybe a little bit further. Minus 20. Let's go with minus 20 if you want to follow along. And if you want all the exact numbers, the finished file will be available in the link down below. Next step is to lay out that curve, because it's really going to affect the framing and everything that follows. So I'll choose curve and choose Bezier curve. Kind of can't see it right now, but if you tab into edit mode, you'll be able to see these 2 points that you can work with. And this is maybe the trickiest part, because like I said, everything follows from it. But I want it to come in from screen right, somewhere down there, and then rotate it so that it kind of goes in that way, scale it up so that it looks smooth. And then this one, let's look at the camera view. I kind of want it to do a turn like this, so I'll scale that up a good amount. And like I said, this is the trickiest part, making sure it looks good in all directions. It's really easy to get a kinky, weird curve, but if you only use fewer points, I find that helps a lot, and just orbit around until it looks good. I think something like this is getting there. Always make sure it looks good from the camera point of view. Rotate it up. Maybe give that something like that. And then this one, oh, I can't even see that one from here. Let's go to the top view, pull it over a bit, and then just think about how I want that to come in. Swoop down, or, oh, I hit it on accident. Swoop down, swoop up. I don't want it to look too squarey like this. So I'll do something like that. I think this is the problem. Maybe if I tilt that up, that looks more squarey. That looks so much worse. Rotate it, something like that. Rotate it, something like that. I think that's a better curve, just this kind of 3-point lazy swooping turn. This is the path that the ball is going to fly along, just to clarify that. So the way to get this blob to follow the path is a modifier called curve, and then you have to choose which curve it should follow. In this case, there's only one, but you can eyedropper and choose the right curve, and then it looks like it's stuck to the end of the curve. And this is something that's a little bit confusing. You can see the orange dot showing that the object is still at the origin point, even though it appears that it's up there. So if I grab on the x-axis, it'll go backwards along the curve all the way back to there. So actually on frame 1, I'm just going to set a keyframe for location using I. And then on about frame 100, I found if I use the very end of that, and then actually a little bit more on the x-axis until it's fully out of frame, set a keyframe there, and maybe set the end of the animation to be about 100. Now I don't have to hit GX every time, I can just swipe through. And I see a little bit of a kink in the road up here. So if I select that, let's see what I can do about that. From this view, maybe I can stretch that out a little bit, make it a little less abrupt of a change. And then I think this very front section is a little boring still. I think I want it to be a little higher and a little swoopier, like that, so that it really swoosh, swoosh. That's working. You can fine tune this forever, of course. Maybe a little bit stretchier on that one. Swoosh, swoosh. No, I liked it better before, even with the tight curve. I don't think this kinking is actually going to show up in the final animation because of the modifiers we're going to put on top. But again, if you're going to spend your time on any part of this, get the curve right. But just for instructional purposes, I'm going to assume that this is perfect. The next modifier I want to put on after the curve is, what was it? Remesh. So it remeshes the thing, and right now it's not doing anything too interesting. It just makes the topology different. But if I choose blocks, it looks like Minecraft or Legos or something, and that's a little bit more what I was looking for. And right now these blocks are totally aligned to the world X, Y, and Z locations or directions. So the quick way to change that is to press N to pull up this panel, go to Tool, and check Origins, and this will let me change the rotation without having it fly off the handle. So I can just give it a little more interesting of a rotation. And yeah, I already like that more. It kind of lines up with the way that it's going. It doesn't line up here, but it does here and here, so I'm pretty okay with that. And then the next modifier that I want is wireframe. And right off the bat, what this does is replaces the original geometry with a wireframe version, but you can uncheck replace original, and that will keep the old geometry there. And then if we change this material offset to 1, that'll give the new wireframe geometry a material slot that's 1 lower than whatever material was already assigned. And that sounds complicated, but it's really not that difficult. We can select new, make a new slot, click new, and now there are technically 2 different materials, but right now they look the same. You can name one light. Actually, I want the first one to be dark. We can name one dark and name the other light. And then this dark color, we can change the base color to something like black. And this light one, we can change its emission value to something very bright. And I don't see the change until we click on rendered or look dev up here, and then we can see what's happening. So that's how I want it to look. You can choose different colors if you want, or skip the step. And then to give it a little bit more variation, I actually want to slip a modifier in, I think, above remesh. So I'll just collapse that. And I just want to give it a little bit more texture, a little bit more than just a blob. So I'll choose displace, and wow, it doesn't look good at the start. But again, if I put it above remesh, then it still follows the same look, following those 2 steps. But we have the opportunity to change the displacement. Right now it's just inflating it uniformly. That doesn't look very good. If I click this new texture, it will create a new texture inside of Blender. which by default is a black image that doesn't still doesn't look good. So to edit the texture, we can click this button or just go over to the texture tab. They do the same thing. And then instead of using an image or movie, I've been using clouds, and I think it looks good. You can try Voronoi or wood to get different looks for it. But clouds gives it just a little bit more interesting of a silhouette, just a little extra going on. And as always, watch through the whole thing and make sure that it actually looks good. I want it to look a little glitchy, so that's kind of where I'm coming at for that. And you can change the size to, again, change the look. If it goes to a very large size, it starts to look more smooth. And if it's a very low size, like 0.01, then it looks more craggly. So as always, you can tune this to your taste. I'm just going to stick with that for now, I think. Maybe a little bigger than 0.01, 0.1, so that it still has some continuity between where it was and this. Back to the modifier tab, just check all my work here. I think that's looking pretty good. So to get the other level of cubiness, the big chunky cubes in there, I'll just duplicate the same thing so that it has the same animation, it has the same modifiers, and it looks exactly the same. You can't even tell the difference right now. But in this remesh modifier, there's an option for octree depth, which if we just turn that down, we'll get bigger and bigger cubes up until, I guess, 1 cube. And if we turn it down, we'll get smaller and smaller cubes until your computer can't handle it. Probably don't go to 8. I'm going to go back to 2. And so I'm getting some bigger, chunkier cubes around 3. And you can use the scale parameter to fine-tune that scale. But it doesn't make a huge difference for me. I'll just leave it at 3. And then I want to change the texture over here. I'll start a new texture that's a duplicate of the original one because I want this one to just have a different pattern to it. Instead of following the exact same size and everything, I'll give it something else to do. Just try to find one that looks good. Oh, I went back to 0.1, but something like that. And then, oh, while I'm thinking about it, I want to change the rotation. So only origins is still selected. I can hit R twice and just give it something else, some other orientation like that, so that we get some more interesting intersections and a little more detail going on. I'm going to go back to the modifiers and just turn off a few of these. Actually, it's more helpful to see that. Let's see if I want to change the strength or anything. If I change the strength higher and make the mid-level lower, and then change the scale of this cloud texture to something higher, yeah, I think I'll get some more blocky protrusions, so that it'll just have occasional big blocks instead of the whole thing kind of being covered in big blocks. Yeah, that's more what I was looking for. Just a few extra things, not completely overpowering the small blocks. One thing I want to address back here is that the opening frame isn't really working anymore because it got bigger. So I'll just shift that further off to the side, and I don't need to re-keyframe or anything. Just shift that starting point off to the side, and then it'll come in and fly off. While I'm thinking about the animation though, I do want to select both of these and actually fine-tune the speed, because right now it's just smooth in, smooth out. It's not super interesting. So I'll go to the animation tab, switch this editor over to a graph editor using that button, graph editor, and just click right on that line to give myself more room to work with. And so you can see it eases in, goes fast, eases out. I actually kind of want the opposite of that. I want it to already be traveling fast through space or whatever the story is, and then it needs to slow down a little bit to make this turn. The turn happens around here, so maybe I'll scale that up a bit more and rotate it a bit. And just watch it back to see how that works. It's looking a little too energetic actually with how the blockiness is working out. Let me try something else with these blocks. If I change the strength down, see if that works. And now the last piece of the puzzle is the particles that fall out, the extra boxes that get left behind, and that's where we unhide the original box using Alt-H or clicking the eye icon up there. And I'm going to go to edit mode and scale it down until it's, you know, whatever you feel like, but about the same size as those other boxes, maybe split the difference between them. And right now it has no material at all, so I'll shift select one of the other boxes and use Control L or Command L to copy the materials. And now it has the same materials, and then Control L again and choose modifiers. So now this little cube is following the curve. It's somewhere inside there. If we press X, it'll go back to the origin. If we press X on displace, it won't be displaced. Remesh, it won't be remeshed. So now it just has the wireframe modifier. We could have just done a new wireframe modifier, but that seemed easier at the time. I don't know if it actually was. And I'll give this one a little bit more thickness, maybe, just to differentiate it some. And the last thing, I think I liked the look where this one doesn't replace, or does replace the original, and I'll give it a little bit more thickness. Again, just a slight difference in texture there. You go either way on that, but I kind of like that for now. So now we need to set up a particle system that will emit these other cubes. So I'll select either one of these, doesn't really matter. I'm going to use small just as long as you can keep track of it. And then go into the Particle Properties tab, add a new particle system. The first thing I want to change is the number from 1000 to just 100. It doesn't need to completely fill the screen. I want the end frame to be 100, and I want the lifetime to be long enough that we won't ever see them disappear, so maybe 200. And right now, I think the particles are shooting from the actual object origin back there where the object actually is, not where it appears to be because of the modifiers. The way to fix that is inside this source tab, we can use modifier stack, and now they will fall from where the object actually appears to be. I think emitting from faces looks fine in this case, but instead of emitting these halos, I would like to go to the render tab, and instead of render as halo, we can render as object and use the picker to pick the cube. And by default, they're very, very small. That's because the scale is set to 0.05 by default. So if we set the scale to 1, now they are full-sized cubes, and they just fall, which is not what I want right now. And they also have no variation in their rotation. So we can check on rotation and then set the randomize all the way up. If I start the animation again, okay, now they have difference in rotation. These cubes are too big too, so I'm going to go to edit mode and scale them down about that much. And then I've got to change the wireframe because they're looking kind of weird right now. Something like that. And the next particle system thing I want to change. Back in the particle systems, I want to turn off gravity, which you'd think might be in the physics tab, but it's actually in the field weights tab. I can turn down gravity and check how that looks. Now they fly off in the same direction at a constant speed, which is kind of spacey, kind of physically accurate, as much as we can call this animation accurate to anything. But that's not what I want right now. What I ended up liking was changing the physics. I changed the mass of these boxes to 0, which may or may not be actually necessary, and then changing the damp to 0.1, which you'll see the effect of that. They get dampened. Instead of following the same trajectory forever, they kind of slow down as if they're maybe in a liquid or something, and I see a really bad convergence right there, or intersection that I'd like to fix. So I'll try just a new random seed, see if that helps. Go back to the beginning. That's better. That's better. I like that. If you don't like the particle system, just change the random seed. And I think that's it for the particle system. The next thing I want to do is just set up the final render. So we're in the rendered tab right now, and it still looks very viewporty, so I want to do some shading and fix this up. Back to the rendered tab, back to the camera view. So first things first, this world background I'm going to turn all the way down and actually do something else with. I'll go to the world nodes down here, add a gradient texture, plug the color into color, and right now it's going left to right and I want to rotate it. So this is where if you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, it gets a lot easier. I can just Control T and it adds a mapping node. I can rotate by 90 degrees. You could add these two nodes yourself, but it's just quicker. And then I can rotate location X and just get that horizon quite a bit lower, something like that. And then instead of going black to white, I'm going to add one more node, a color ramp, our best friend color ramp. And then instead of going from black to white, I can choose a different color over here, like a very deep dark blue, something fairly saturated and fairly dark to still get like a spacey night sky kind of look. And the big one is these cubes are still looking flat. Very easy way to fix that is with bloom. Because this is just stylistic and I like it, I'm going to turn the intensity way up. And then I can change the color here, which also kind of changes the color that it looks like the cubes are. So if I go maybe more in the cyan area, more in the purple area, something like that, whatever suits you. And I should probably do some depth of field. I can select the camera up here, go to the camera properties tab, enable depth of field, and just for troubleshooting, I'm going to turn the f-stop all the way down and then get the part that I want in focus. I think I'll have the farthest point be in focus. It kind of spends the most time over there. And then instead of an f-stop of 0.1, I'll go to more like 1.8 maybe, just so these are kind of out of focus. I think it looks nice. And that's pretty much it. The last thing to do is export it. Really, any other artistic changes you want to make are up to you, but I am going to export this thing to a file location of my choosing. And instead of rendering to PNG and all that, I'm just going to choose FFmpeg video because this is Eevee and it'll go pretty quick. The encoding, I'm going to choose QuickTime. It just seems to work everywhere. H.264 is all fine. There's no audio. 1080p, yeah, anything that you want to change for your delivery system, but I think I'm ready to export. So that's render animation. And there you have it. Oh. One more thing I forgot to do is to move my original cube, the one that's instancing all these things. I can just move it off to the side, and that's totally fine. Now I'm ready to render. And there you have it. You've successfully made this very specific animation. Hopefully you learned something along the way. I'm Parker Barassa. See you in the next one.